Aastad Deboo, a pioneer in Indian contemporary dance, in conversation with Dr. Arsha Sethi, an eminent art scholar and art activist. Aastad Deboo, Arsha Sethi.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Radhika, Nikita, and the team at the Natya Ballet Center that's put together the second edition of the Natya Ballet Festival. I know how hard it is to run festivals, so a round of applause, I think, is very due to the efforts this team has made. I'm also very happy about the way they have structured the days of the festival, giving adequate time to conversations, to workshops, and performances. So I'm so happy to be starting off the conversation section with none other than Aastad Deboo. There are so many friends here in the auditorium who have been part of Aastad's journey. And first, as I welcome you, Aastad, I would like to remind you and also to mention to you all in the audience that some of the nicest conversations I have had are conversations with people I have known at key points in my life. So let me begin this conversation by reminding you of something. I'm sure you don't recall it, but I was at that time, the year is 1987, and it's the early part of the year, possibly March 1987. I had just become critic with with the Times of India, and I had decided to do an interview with Aastad. He was staying at Nirula's hotel or York Hotel or something in Connaught Place, and you said, sure, come up and we will speak. And I was at that time in my final trimester of pregnancy. My elder son, Aman, I was carrying him. And I walked up the steps because for some reason there was no lift, and knocked on Aastad's door. He opens it, he looks at me. We'd never met before this. And he says, oh my God, you're pregnant. You should have told me. I said, no, that's okay. And I was huffing and puffing. And Aastad put his hand on my stomach instinctively. I felt this was a moment of bonding, and then little Aman, who was inside me, kicked Aastad. And I said, oh, the baby is kicking. So that's how intimately we started our friendship. He has remained a dear, dear friend in my heart, even if we have not met very often. So today it's not me who's going to come up with surprises, Aastad. It'll be you who will come up with surprises for me. So the year that I'm talking about, 1987, is an important period in your life because this is about 10 years after you have returned from your training abroad. So my first choice I give you is we can either do a little, backward trip in time and you recount the early part of your struggles, or we talk about the journey from 1987 onwards.
We can talk definitely right from 1978.
Okay, so let's start with 1978. Again, this is a very significant date in Aastad's life.
Well, I returned at the end of 77 after having been overseas for 8 years, traveling and trying to discover a new language, because prior to that I had studied Kathak for 10 years. So for me to sort of absorb and then to come back with a very rich experiences on all the 5 continents in the matter of 8 years that I was there. And it took me a year after returning that I had my first performance at the Prithvi Theatre in 1978. And it's quite a landmark that last night I premiered my new work in Mumbai, 40 years having been back in India with Bahauddin Dagar on the Rudraveena, a performance called Interconnect. So yes, 78 to 88, I mean, the struggle, for the first year, it took me a year before Jennifer Kapoor and my friend late Satyadev Dubey decided that I should perform at Prithvi. And slowly, the sort of turtle moved, but there were incidents like, first of all, the Indian classical dance gurus had sort of said, I am persona non grata, like there's nothing like that, which is a part of our culture. So whatever I was doing was looked at with very suspicious eyes. And it's funny that later in 1995, when I got my Sangeet Natak Academy Award, that some of the gurus started saying, okay, if the Sangeet Natak is putting its stamp of approval, then maybe he is okay. I even recall a conversation having with Secretary Culture years ago, and he said, Mr. Deboo, आपको recognition मरने के बाद ही मिलेगा. Pioneers have to suffer. So when I did get I was very keen on sending him a little note. अफसोस की बात है कि जीते जी अब मुझे संगीत नाटक मिल रहा है.
It's strange that you should say that it was after getting the Sangeet Natak Academy Award you felt that the gurus had sort of toned down
Right.
their critical reactions to your performance because of two reasons. My first point is that I think by that time there were people who were doing more drastic things, if I could say, in the name of dance, and so you were closer to what they were familiar with because, and here's the second point that I make, is that really in a way your dance carries forward the initial training that entered your body. So it is quite evident that you have had a Kathak training. And then, of course, after 77, when you returned, you had some Kathakali training as well, which included a full training with performance at the Guruvayur temple.
Correct.
So would you talk a little bit about how you find your inspiration in the original trainings that you have had?
Well, when I came back in 1972 for a very brief period of time, I had done a performance in Bombay, and that time Bombay, now Mumbai. And Dr. Sunil Kothari sort of said, Aastad, why don't you look at Kathakali? And so I was very fortunate to meet the late Guru E. Krishna Panikar, who took me on very readily because, again, by then I had started moving in a different manner. I was also thinking in a different way of presenting my work. I mean, though Kathak training was there, but by then it had really sort of taken a back seat. So he took me, and I was just there for 3 months, and he taught me sort of Prapad, the initial Kathakali. And I took that and I went off again. And when I came back, for the next 6 years, I studied with Krishna Panikarji. And I even did a full performance with a chutti in Mumbai. That was the only time I performed Kathakali. Never did after that. But the reason of studying Kathakali was to imbibe with the rich vocabulary and the way my body was sort of moved on stage. It really added, because what I find today among the younger dancers, that fine, I mean, doors have opened and there is an umbrella for contemporary dance and people are sort of exploring and expressing themselves. But I asked, what is your dance education? And in 99% of them, I said, "Apne kya hai? Contemporary." But हाँ, contemporary में आपकी तालीम क्या है? Zero. They have a talent in moving, they look at videos and they start working and which is fine. But there is no sort of soul in their work at the end of it. You see it and you say, wow, that's great how it's moving. But beyond that, the dance is cold for me.
So this is a very interesting point you're making, because in the Indian system, the concreteness of the Guru Shishya Parampara is what imbues the dance language into your body. You too have studied with great masters through great techniques, whether it's Jose Limon or Martha Graham. You've also worked with Pina Bausch and all. So are you sort of suggesting it is, even in this contemporary way, you need to be trained with a master?
Absolutely.
Or through a master's tradition?
Absolutely. You look at dancers anywhere abroad, they all undergo a training, a physical training, with each one's technique being different. But if your body, especially like ballet, okay, so ballet has a full, and if you do not study that technique, you're not going to be a ballet dancer. Even in the contemporary sort of techniques, which either were Graham or Limon or Cunningham, they had sort of a vocabulary which was imparted on the students who took their classes. So if you do not have a vocabulary, how are you going to choreograph? You need, a rich sort of, in your own bank of movements. Otherwise, what you see today is repetition, and and today contemporary is more like it's theater. Okay, the trend is there also in Europe. There's nothing wrong with that. But I just find that the young, and even the institutions which are doing diploma courses, and I find it, again, in 1 year, you're having a diploma in contemporary dance, or even, and I'm not going to mention an institution earlier, was offering a 3-year course. And I asked one of the young people, I said, so every 6 months they learnt a new technique. So by the time you came to the 3rd year, you've already forgotten what you've done in the last 2 years of 4 different courses of 4 different techniques. Mm-hmm. So one does agree that there is not an institution here which sort of imparts a full sort of real, like, okay, there are lots of people studying Kalaripayat, which is wonderful. So you see these kind of, but they're very fleeting. There's nothing substantial to hold on to.
Right. So actually, since you've mentioned Kalari, I'd also like to draw your attention to the fact that many of the contemporary dancers in India today have in a way been trained by in Chow, and so they use the extensions and the expansion of the body and the contraction and the core muscle usage of Chow as well. But one point that I would like to make is that today in the field of contemporary dance, we have a lot of dancers who've originally been trained in rather demanding classical dance forms, but somehow their body has forgotten that training, whereas your body carries the training of Kathak and Kathakali even today in your work. So that's something that I find, that you've been very honest to all your teachers.
Well, well, okay, yes, I've been honest. I've been honest in my work. And yes, that is my foundation. I mean, in subsequent years, I have also started developing my own vocabulary of movement. And I find that sometimes that I can sort of, if I feel it's necessary, to take something from our tradition to extend my work, to express my thoughts. And even though I may be doing abstract work, the rasas are very much in my own head. Whatever I'm trying to portray is very much there.
So I'm glad you brought us to the rasas, because last night when I was making notes of what are the points I definitely want to touch upon, one of them was master of rasa. It may not necessarily be the way it is dealt with in the Natya Shastra with sancharis and things like that. But it is undeniable how you are a master of rasa, whether it is by the whole body, the sarvang abhinay, or upang abhinay, or just the angika abhinay, and satvika. And you change very fast between rasas and choose the mixture of rasa, movements through rasa very well, which in the Shastric tradition is called auchitya. So would you like to talk a little bit about, or maybe even demonstrate a little bit about how you manage to get these fine surgical shifts in rasas?
Well, it depends on what I'm trying to sort of portray. But okay, I'll show you a little extract where you'll see the bhakt rasa, and then I'll continue, and then I'll see what y'all take out of it.
Okay.
Okay?
It's a little examination for all of us here. This is the rasa aspect.
clap later. We clap later. You know.
So I think it's,
So here again,
Yeah.
I just use this music is something else, but this music gives me the sort of tool to express the different sort of rasas through the body. And as you saw, the face just has a slight, sort of not a very sort of in-your-face kind of emotion.
but the most remarkable thing for me is I have seen Ati Vilambit being done as lay work, you
Right.
know, and for Tat and Kathak
Right.
and all that. But Ati Vilambit release of bhava, that really, I definitely would like to write something about it sometime soon. So if in your many travels and your days that are already accounted for, I hope you can spare some time for a more detailed interview on this aspect, because we can't have it
Sure,
a
sure.
bilateral interview in front of everyone. So the hold on the sthai bhav and the release of the energy in this Ati Vilambit manner is truly your signature work. And that balance, and is there a fitness regimen you follow?
Yes, absolutely. I'm 71, and as you know, as not only dancers, as human beings, our body starts sort of, some way or the other, something's not working. So yes, I have to be working at 3-4 times a week, and one thing being sort of on your own. So one really, and the kind of work, even like the kind of sort of my own way of workout will be is sort of, just because what I'm doing these days is doing a lot of, so just working very, very minimally. I'm taking it a bit faster, just to, so these kind of sort of,
Very Tai Chi like, balance, core musculature building.
so it's very, very minimal and just holding on and concentrating. So there are a series of sort of movements that one goes through just to keep the body flexible. And then there are sort of the normal certain yoga aspects, swimming, walking.
So you've chosen and created your own
Yeah.
exercise pattern.
And just dancing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that brings me to the point I was about to say, Aastad. If you don't tell people you're 71-year-old, you're the coolest guy I know, and certainly the coolest 71-year-old I know. Did you guys notice that amazing haircut? I have been watching Aastad's haircuts for almost 30 years now. The first time he had this, it was like knots and crosses kind. And I was standing behind him. I said, if I had a indelible ink pen, I could do knots and crosses.
Very true, very true. Because again, my hairdresser is an artist in herself, because the way she sort of mows my hair, landscapes my hair. And twice a year, because when I'm away overseas, I go away for an extended period of time. So then the hair grows and the lines are gone. And then I come back to her and she says, "What is your theme?" And I'll say, "Okay." And then she's also like a tarot card reader, and she's like a mystic. So then if she sees some little red mark, "Oh, are you under tension?" I said, "No, darling, I'm always under tension." What's new about it? And then she just sort of like, just day before yesterday, she manicured this new style, which she gave because I've had performance last night. I'm here this morning.
Actually, it is true. You know, this thing that you mentioned about linking your hair landscape, as you
Right.
call it, with what you're going to present. Because the first time, the Noughts and Crosses time was also one you were sort of premiering a new work, and so that's really it's something very unique to us, that there is no other artist who concentrates on the hairscape as much as Aastad does when he does a new work. So Aastad, actually two areas I could go drift off to, so you can pick again. Should we talk about the work that you have been doing with other artists, mentoring younger artists, or should we look at the journey that you're taking personally with your artwork? We're going to talk about both. You just have a choice of what we talk about first.
Okay, we'll briefly talk about my work in Manipur for the last 16 years.
Okay.
Again, when I started off, the first 10 years, I was a solo performer, as I said. And in the time when I returned in 78, because things were so difficult and constantly being slapped, not literally, but saying no, 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 no.
From donors and supporters.
So I spent 6 months overseas, continuing with my network of people that I knew, whether it was Europe or whether it was Japan, wherever. One continued. So for the 10 years, I was away for 6 months, and the other 6. And then gradually, the time started being more in India and less overseas. But though on an average, I spend 3 to 5 months overseas, even now, with different projects and performances. So as dancers were not available, and I'd seen the Thangta practitioners, so I was very fascinated. And it so happened that way back in 1995, Zee Television decided to have their first television award. And the sort of event management says, Aastad, we'd like you to do something spectacular. I said, okay. And this is, funding is there. So I said, okay, let me go to Manipur. And again, the arts and the gurus are very, very serious about and fair enough. But my sort of reputation preceded me, and I went to a couple of Thangta groups, and I did come across the late Devabrata Sinha of the Hula group, and I asked him that if he would allow me, so to which he readily agreed. And so I selected 10 of those, and at that point of time, I was doing, before the Sharmak Dowes and Terence Lewis came, I was doing jazz sort of, I did a show called 5-Star Fantasy about 5-star hotels. So I had these group of kids who all sort of could move,
in a jazzy way.
So I said, okay, fine. So I selected 10 and 10, and I became the spirit, and sort of instigated these two groups to fight, and at the same time, I brought in peace together. So in that 10-minute work, I realized that, wow, there is a great possibility of just working. So I asked again Guruji, and because of the funding, I wish I could have had 10, but I worked with 4. And I did a work called Contraposition. And when I premiered it for the first time, I had Louis Banks and Shiva Mani performing live the music. And again, Indian classical, or even, they're not classical, but musicians in India today all say, we would like to work with you. But the problem today, they don't have time compared to musicians that you work. Though, as I speak, I've just done with Bahauddin Dakar, and he did give me, we were able to spend a good 6 weeks developing and working. But normally when Indian musicians, okay, ye hoga, ऐसे फिर improvise कर देंगे. I said, नहीं, ये नहीं होता है. So with the Thangta, I sort of created a work called Celebration. And then after the first round with the musicians, I decided to rework with my own music. And again, it was a great challenge for these young practitioners because, up there they're not used to world music or minimal music. So for them, again, also to teach them how to sort of the counts and where, then they would pick up their own music cues. And the process has been very, very interesting for me with all my collaborations. So that had a good life. And then while I was there, I came across Guru Satyaban Singh of the Pungchalam of Sri Sri Govindji Nath Sankirtan. And there again, I had the opportunity, the India Book Fair, the Frankfurt Book Fair was having India as the country of honor, and the Ministry of Culture sort of asked me to create a work. So I created a 20-minute work with them. And from there, it has led on to a 12-year collaboration where I've done 3 choreographies, Rhythm Divine and Rhythm Divine 2 and the previous one. So they still continue, but now they're on their way out. Because, you know, after 7, 8 years working with the group, I start getting saturated. I also feel that even, not that I have any problem working, but it's just that I don't find that it's going to take it further. Something else pops up into my head, and that's how it sort of continues to work. So while working in the initial years, as dancers would not come forward, I started also looking at theatre people. And I knew of a deaf theatre company in Calcutta by the name of Action Players. And as I used to go to Calcutta, I just told the theatre director, I said, why don't I do a workshop? I had no clue as to how I was going to teach the deaf. So I said, okay, let's take it on. So for the first 2 years, I gave them a 3-4 day workshop. And the third day, the theatre director said, Aastad, can you spare a longer time with my actors? So one of my sort of toes fell by the way, and I said, okay. So I did a 3-week workshop, and after that, I did a little presentation. And then I said, okay, there is a possibility that these young actors can also move. Now, how do you teach them, you people ask? Okay, so my teaching method, whether it's the hearing or the deaf, is that you learn to count, because of my work being very, very minimal. So it's the count of 8, and the count of 8 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is the rhythm, and everybody starts learning, and they all have to learn to count and be simultaneous, because that's when you find synchronicity. And that was also one of the most important things I had to tell my deaf kids, that we all have to be synchronized. I do not want the audience to say, oh, they made a mistake because they can't hear. I said, there is no room for mistake. So with the Calcutta group, I spent 14 years with them, with movement and dance. But my next group, which came from Chennai, the Clark School for the Deaf, and there I did a full 60-minute non-stop work. And it was called, again, my work with the Thangta people was celebration. With my deaf, it was contraposition. And here I worked with the rasas. So these girls counted, but in different rhythms. Each rasa had a different rhythm. And the fact that they were Bharatanatyam trained. So I could use some of their vocabulary and then add my own. So that was with them. And with them, I did 75 performances in a matter of 5 years. Wow. And the highlights were like, after having premiered it in India, we opened the Deaf Olympics in Melbourne.
Yes.
Then we went on to travel nationally. And the last performance I did was at the invitation of the late Dr. President Abdul Kalam, who invited, and we performed at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. And what was very touching, that after the performance, the President himself insisted that he serve refreshments to the 8 girls.
That's really wonderful.
Yeah.
But then he really was the people's president.
You know.
And
and from there, it so happened that, you know, there all these NGOs says, आप हमारे साथ क्यों नहीं काम करते? हम हाँ करेंगे, but nobody has the money, and I'm the one who has to raise the money, and again, money doesn't. The corporates and people are, so okay. So it so happened that the trustees of Salam Balak Trust, Sanjoy Roy, was very sort of insistent, why don't I come and work with the Salam Balak kids? And so it so happened that one of my corporate sponsors who used to support my deaf work, I went to them with a new deaf proposition, and he said, "Oh, Aastad, we're not into deaf anymore. We're into street children." That was a literary way of saying, oh, I said, okay. So you want us now, the new thing is street children. Okay. So it so happened so because the HSBC CEO was very friendly with Meera Nair, so she said, okay, now it's street children time. Though they did support Salam Balak on a separate on a platform. So I said, okay. And the other thing was, when these corporates give grant, it's like, okay, अब हमें 3 महीने में बताइए आपने कैसे अपने पैसे के,
Yeah.
So within 5 months, I had to come up with a new work with these young, dynamic kids of the Salam Balak, and that time they were at Paharganj mein the na?
Yes,
So
Paharganj. They were
Paharganj
the
mein the, yeah.
station children.
Yeah, so so all these kids came and they were all, and I had gone to see them perform, and I'm going to show you a little clip of theirs right away. So they were doing all Bollywood. I said, Bollywood to theek hai, but ab Bollywood ko ab side mein rakhiye aur ab shuru karenge, So I worked with them, and within 4 months, and there I had 4 girls also. The problem, we couldn't have many girls because the girls were living in Gurgaon. So from there, to come from Gurgaon to, Paharganj was quite a trek. But still, they were all very determined. And I selected 16. And then some of the others said, looking at them, and they said, I said, well, no entry, because there's no more space, So the first work was called Breaking Boundaries. And from there, I took 8 young men, because a lot of my work is very physical. So not that I have anything against working with women, but I find it that one can really scold them, whack them, as and when, if I'm sort of frustrated, if I haven't got it right after having corrected them. So I did a work interpreting Tagore. It was at the time of the 150th anniversary of Rabindranath Tagore. And I revisited that work of mine because in 1987, the Indian Express in Calcutta was doing a work on Tagore, and they had asked me. So I had done solo presentations.
That's right.
So I took these solos, and now it was able to bring these young dancers in. And we did that, and I took them to the Festival of Cervantino, and we did a 9-city tour of Mexico. We did Colombia, Spain, Andorra, and then we did a lot in India also. So let's show that video clip, please. A clip of the making of Breaking Boundaries. How are we doing for time? So I need to...
What is the time? Okay, we have 15 minutes more.
Oh, 15 only. Okay.
Are you comfortable?
No, just get it.
For all the
Suraj,
young
Aastad
ones,
here again.
I just want to mention,
You spoke to Neeraj
funders'
just now?
priorities are exactly
We had
like
spoken before he
Aastad
left, and
described.
he had said, yes,
it
we
changes
want to
every
do
3 years.
a
So you need
one-page,
to know what
which will be
funders' priorities
distributed.
are.
Yeah, but as I said, it won't come out from my expense. I told Sanjoy very clearly, because my budget is now, gone beyond. Now Sanjoy's only coming back on the 10th. We should get cracking on it by tomorrow. But did you find out? I'd asked you whether these people have a CD player. I have to see whether that's possible, whether they can carry it or not, you know. I mean, they can carry it. I'll just double check also. I'm just arriving there in a matter of minutes. Okay.
आज से करीब 3-4 साल पहले हमारा एक शो हुआ था हैबिटेट में, वहाँ पे सर को मैंने पहली बार देखा था। वहाँ पे एज ए चीफ गेस्ट आए थे वो। उसके बाद जब यहाँ पे आए तो उन्होंने बोला दिखाओ आप क्या कर रहे हो। एक ड्रीम करके एक थीम पे एक डांस था, वो किया था। उसके बाद सर ने बताया देखो मेरा डांस इससे अलग होगा, तो सर ने थोड़ी अपनी झलक दिखाई थी, तब से भी चल रहा है।
I showed them what my work was all about, and I said, this is the way we will be taking our work forward. That I will first of all make you aware of your body, of the movements you're able to or capable of, and then also making them aware of each other. You know, when you're working, you're just not into yourself, but you have to be aware of your co-dancer. You got to be aware of the space. For me, spaces are very, very important, and I wanted to give them a little bit of an experience of how in a limited space, or how in keeping in rooms of where I'm rehearsing in one of the rooms, they would be in there, and they slowly had to sort of go all the way back. And then Pankaj said, "Ye dance hai kya?" I said, "Haan, we dance hai."
Okay, thank you. So just again, you know, because of the shortage of time, no claps, later. Yeah.
You evidently are a tough taskmaster. I've never seen anybody control the audience like this. So I'm glad we saw this dance film. I would call it a dance film because I do a festival of dance films. I would like to show this at some point.
Absolutely.
But you have actually done choreography for films as well. While the Salam Balik Trust did show you Bollywood dancing and you said put it on a side, you yourself have done some choreography for films.
Yeah, but my choreography for films again is not the ek, do, teen, chatka, you know. It's sort of very much my style of work. I mean, I recall my very first one was, yes, it was a little bit more because it was way back in 1980 when Sanjay Khan
And Zeenat
Zeenat
Aman.
Aman, we did Abdullah, and there's Kalpana Iyer was the little sort of
seductress.
Jhatka girl, the item number, the item dance number. So we had done the sort of, Sanjay said, chalo, chalo, let's do it. So it was done in sort of in the desert. So it still had its movement, but not in the typical sort of, then came sort of Vishal Bharadwaj's Omkara. And then after that, there was
Before that, Meenakshi.
Meenakshi of M.F. Hussain with Deboo in it, and Kunal Kapoor. And then the very last one was Mani Ratnam's Ravan. And there again, sort of, it was an escape sequence. So it wasn't really a dance where, she's trying to escape. So the whole thing was done in water, and at times also where Ravan, which Abhishek and Vikram sort of confront, so there were sort of movements with sticks and sort of, so it was a very stylized choreography. And again, I've not really looked into sort of working for Bollywood. And there have been times when Bollywood has come, but there was always the problem of time because, even in the early years, I had my work chalked out. So they would say, can we start work from tomorrow? And I said, no, I can't start work for the next 3 months. So, and both Mani Ratnam and Vishal held their ground, said, no, we want you. So they delayed their shooting while I was finishing an assignment and came back and went back. So that's how sort of, but yes, it has been a great fun. I really enjoy. And what has been very impressed, and also it's not that, but they were very much aware of what I have done or what I was doing. So there was a kind of, and also it was very funny being on the set and being called Master G, and sort of they have this whole sort of culture, and you have to have an assistant. So I took a kid as an assistant. But being that I am, so even, okay, in the rehearsal room, I was choreographing and all. But once we were on the set, I would automatically go and say, nahi, aap piche aiye, ab monitor se aap dekhiye. And I recall once in Mani Ratnam's Ravan, it was in the waterfalls, and I was there, and Mani sir saying, nahi, tell them to come back. But I said, if they are there, why can't I be there? No, you come here, let your assistant do it. So, but yeah.
So there's a manner to everything
yes.
in a film as well. You mentioned Ravan, and Ravan has been part of your life earlier when you explored the poetry of Mukti Bodh.
Right.
And you've explored Indian poetry in many performances, but I think possibly the first one was Mukti Bodh's Lakdi Ka Ravan.
Right.
Yeah, tell
so
us
again,
about it.
when Khajuraho came up again, for the first time, the Khajuraho Dance Festival decided to have a contemporary dancer on their platform. And the sort of brief was you either take a story of the temples or you look into a poet of Madhya Pradesh. So, I have these think tanks even today. And that time, Satyadev Dubey, my friend, was very much there. I said, Satyadev, he says, Mukti Bodh ki kavitaएं padho. I said, theek hai. So I decided and I came across Lakdi Ka Ravan. So I said, how am I going to do a contemporary interpretation to it? So I said, okay, fine. So I made today's politician the Ravan. And so I literally came on stage in one of the official cars with a red light and came onto the stage like a mantri. And all the people said, "Arey koi mantri aaye hain is stage pe." And I had these, my friends had come to help me, so I made them my black cats. So they got off, opened the door for me, and I walked onto the stage, and I said, and and the Gundecha brothers had also started working with me when they were still in the Drupad Gurukul, working and studying under Dagar Sahab. So they were providing the music, and again, we had worked out each section of the poems in different moods of aspects. So that's how, yes. So the Ravan was, and even today, as I see there's no change. The politician is the Ravan today.
I was planning to ask you a
yes,
question.
and then again, talking about poems, like the Metropolitan Museum of New York about 4 years ago asked me to create a work. And there again, it had to have an Islamic sort of touch to it because it was being held in the Islamic art section. So I said, kya kare. So I took upon the poem Mati by Bulle Shah, and there again, one of the Hashmi, Sohail Hashmi, who's very familiar. So I said, kya, ye pad lo, ye pad lo. So I said, okay, Mati padta hu. So that's how, and that was presented in the first Natya Ballet Dance Festival 2 years ago, Eternal Embrace.
Wonderful.
And we had quite a calamity, you know. And I must say, the audience sat, and it was really, for the first time I was thinking, and I was going like this, and Radhika was saying, my God, for 90 minutes, because the damn electric guy sort of switched off, and my fuse, because my musician had brought an American sort of keyboard player, so it needed a sort of a transfer, and the transfer blew. And it took us 90 minutes chasing around, and here I'm blowing them up, I said, you know, not Ma Ben Ki Gali, but homage to that kind of stuff. So, but finally we went, and we really had practically 95% of the audience sitting there, and we did our first performance in Delhi, on our India tour.
Can I tell you a secret about Delhi? If you do anything connected with the Sufi tradition, Delhi is amazingly
patient. But they didn't know it was a Sufi connection.
Okay.
It was just...
Maybe the bigger scheme of things carried it forward, but I felt...
Dekhte is baar nautanki nachaniya kya la raha hai stage pe.
The Nautanki Nachanya has some amazing work lined up for the next few years. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I've just opened this new work of mine, Interconnect, last night with Bahauddin Dagar on the Rudravina, and there's a Drupad singer by the name of Chintan Upadhyay, Pakhavish. So I'm hoping that now I'll have to, because, you know, today in India, you know, I still have to go and say, oh, Babu, stage de do, you know. So it's not like, it's not like, you know, overseas that, okay, you have a new work coming, you will inform the people, and they say, okay, fine, we would like to program you. So I'll have the oddest task of selling myself. I'm also working right now on Mahatma Gandhi's, you know, centenaries coming up. So again, I'm looking at his sort of one-liners, you know, and trying to sort of put together. So that'll happen. Just received a MacArthur Foundation grant to work with Hema Rajagopal, a Bharatanatyam choreographer in Chicago. So we'll be sort of starting work in India in March, and then going on to completing the work. Then I've been working with a group of Korean musicians, a group called Nore Machi, which is drummers as well as other musicians, and 3 Carnatic musicians. One is Manjunath, who is a sort of a regular feature in Akram Khan's productions. And so that's going to tour. And another new work I've done with Rani Nair, Indian-Swedish girl. And what she has done is she's looked at the archives of my work between 78 and 88, which are not recorded. So what does the body remember? And it's amazing. You know, okay, the body has aged, I'll play the music, and I pretty much can recall the choreography. So there again, we take, it's sort of like she's a Sutradhara on stage, and we look at that, and it's called An Evening in Aastad with Aastad. So that's what is being planned out. I'm dancing in a festival in Brazil, so on and so on. I don't want to brag, you know.
No,
so.
but we are keen to know. I mean, I think...
So, and yes, and there's something lined up for 2020. Is already, because overseas you work a year and a half ahead of time. And here in our country, still things haven't changed. Like, even like the National Center of Performing Arts in Mumbai is going to celebrate 50 years next year. They're still figuring out okay, they've selected a few artists and a time frame is there, but we still don't know when, what time, where. But that's how it works.
Well, I think you've given us so much material to think about and so much material to be proud about. By the way, I must mention, we were talking about awards, and Aastad, I think earlier this year, got the award of, in the South, what is that award?
The Krishna Gana Sabha.
Yeah, Krishna Gana Sabha Award. You know, there have been moments in which the heart, wherever one has been, has rejoiced for Aastad. I remember 1995 when the Sangeet Natak Academy Award was announced for Aastad. It was like, yes! And then he gets the Padma Shri, and it was yes again. And when I heard about this particular award, the Krishna Gana Sabha Award, again it was a moment of yes. Because this is a counter to all the years of no that this man has heard and still persisted. In the beginning, I had asked you to talk about your story of grit. I think anybody who follows your life realizes what a story of grit and determination you are. So I won't ask any more questions now, but if there's any one of you who would like to ask a question, I'd facilitate the process and maybe an answer from Aastad. And if not, we've reached the 11:30 magic hour. We can have a few more minutes. So, anyone? Well, Aastad, I have one more question to ask. Now, this pattern that we are seeing constantly is that you want to work with musicians who have time, musicians whose music matches your dance in a way. And every time what is coming up is that you are enjoying your time with the Dhrupad artists, whether it was the Gundecha brothers, in Khajuraho. And by the way, the Khajuraho invitation, I covered that program. It was a yes moment again, because for Aastad to make it to this very, very classical temple, sinuous kind of a venue where they give you the option, do the temple story, it was a big moment, and he managed to handle that moment really beautifully.
It went back again.
Yeah, well, this time with the...
I took the martial art boys, did
yes, the
celebrations.
martial arts, yes.
And the third time they asked me, and I said, no, I said. Because the kind, which is also very sad today, the government institutions, or other, the money they offer us as artists, it is just mind-boggling. I said, how do you expect that with this little money that I have to bring a group of artists from Manipur, which is not the state next door. So the travel itself sort of eats up 90% of what you get. And then again, so I said, no, enough is enough. You either sort of raise the bar, but again, they couldn't be bothered, because there are so many waiting in the line. So ठीक है. I said, ठीक है, उनका नंबर आ गया, मेरा नंबर कट गया, कोई बात नहीं. That is very sad, that sort of, for us as performers, many of you are here also, we all undergo that the lack of even the respect of when the performer is asked to perform, we all have to make a living, we all have expenses. But again, because we are so thirsty to share our work, we undergo this. And it's time that things changed,
I think you're making a very important point at a very important location. Because this is the place where these decisions get made, and I hope somebody here is listening. Just as I hope that somebody is also listening to the work that in activism, in human rights, that many artists have been taking on at personal cost to themselves. Aastad's association with Sehmat, for instance, it's over 20 years that you have been part of Sehmat's events every year, year after year. And I think that when your own plate is served in such a niggardly manner, to be able to have the large heart to share your art with people where it matters for nothing is also a great skill or a great reflection of who you are as artists. So thank you very much, Aastad, for this lovely conversation. I think we've started the festival on a very good note. Congratulations to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.